Welcome everybody to the NORA podcast studio at Online Retailer. I'm joined here with Zoltan Csaki from Citizen Wolf. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Paul Waddy. I'm an e-commerce advisor and work with a bunch of online retailers, and I'm a founder of Ecomm Nation, a digital marketing agency, and a NORA advisory council member. So I'm really happy that you're here because we haven't met before. I've read a lot about you and your business and what you've been doing. It's fair to say you've been making massive waves, particularly in apparel, but in e-commerce generally. So for me, the next 40 minutes or so, I just really want to learn about your business, your story, what drove you to start Citizen Wolf. And I often find inevitably there's a backstory that some founders have that has caused them, or maybe there was a failure or something, or you discovered something. So I might just ask you to give us the rundown on yourself and where your journey's come from to get you to this point where you've founded Citizen Wolf.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real honour to be here and get to talk about Citizen Wolf, you know. So Citizen Wolf exists to re-engineer the way clothes are made at scale to save our planet. And that's quite simply because the way that fashion in particular is set up is incredibly destructive. And the way we make clothes hasn't really changed since the Industrial Revolution about 250 years ago. And the insanity of the system right now is that 1 in 3 pieces of clothing made every year goes to landfill unsold.
Unsold?
Unsold.
Incredible.
Often with the tags still on. And
sad.
It is insane. It's unconscionable. But it's unbelievable as well, because how can a system remain profitable when 1 in 3 pieces, one in 3 products are just effectively burnt? Right?
So they're just getting chucked.
Just wasted.
Can't sell it. Chuck it in the bin.
It's mad. It's madness, right? And then when you layer on the ecological and the environmental impacts of that waste, it's just unconscionable. So our starting point was the system's broken. How can we basically, by using technology, how can we change the system so that it's less broken?
It's not an easy job.
No, no. And honestly, one of the hardest things is the disconnect between our mission, which is to change the system, and the reality of what we do or what we're known for, which is custom fit t-shirts. So people look at us and think those are the crazy guys in the corner making t-shirts, right? And we are, and that's what we sell day to day, and that's where the money comes from. But the vision has always been much larger than t-shirts. So really excitingly, this is in many ways the end of our first chapter, the end of the beginning and the start of a new chapter for us as we begin to scale out our technology beyond t-shirts and beyond Australia.
And if we go back a couple of years before Citizen Wolf, what was Zoltan doing? What's your story post-school? What was your journey been like?
Yeah, so I studied visual communications at uni. I had a successful career in advertising, and I very much enjoyed that. I went all around the world working for the biggest agencies and the biggest brands as an art director, and I got to the point where I was just sick of the waste.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That business is defined by unrealized, perfectly conceived ideas, right? That's the business of advertising, and very little of it gets off the ground. So all that just wheel spinning and PowerPoints and all that kind of shit, I just got really sick of it. So I had an idea to make some software, actually, which would have made my job as an art director much easier. And in particular, the thing that I was frustrated by was the disconnect between the creative department and the client, and the business, the advertising agency's business, basically not wanting to permeate that boundary where only account managers spoke to the clients, and then there was this translation issue, right? And so I thought, well, what if we could make some software that basically dissolved that boundary and allowed the client and the creative to come to an understanding collaboratively much earlier on in the process about what we were all trying to achieve, such that the ideas that got presented 3-6 weeks later, whatever it was, had a much greater chance of getting off the ground. So I quit my job, my very well-paying job in advertising, much to everybody's
To go
dismay.
into apparel.
No, this was to make the software.
Oh, right.
So the long story short is, I never had any experience doing B2B software sales. I hadn't really had any experience making software, and turns out that's quite hard, both fronts. And so, 2 years in, I'd spent all my life savings and had to shut it down. That was obviously quite painful, but I had a bunch of learning experiences from that. Because doing something I'd never done before worked so well the first time, I thought I'd go into fashion. And with a friend of mine, we started, it was a sideline thing for a while, but then it became my main gig. And it was a traditional fashion brand, right? We were making in China, making in Portugal, standard size breaks, holding inventory, trying to sell it, wholesale, the whole shebang. And I tried for 6 long years to make that work, but ultimately couldn't scale that business either. So again, shut that down, quite painful, tail between my legs. And really then Citizen Wolf is in many ways the phoenix from the ashes, right, of those 2 failures. I took what I learned making software, I took what I learned making clothes, and if you draw a Venn of fashion, tech, and sustainability, Citizen Wolf sits right in the bullseye there. And the sustainability lens comes from my business partner, Eric, who we met in an ad agency actually 20 years ago here in Sydney. He was on the business side of advertising. He had a very successful career, ended up getting frustrated for different reasons, ended up leaving and was working at it was called the IUCN, which is the supranational body of conservation, the UN level body of conservation. So yeah, he brought that sustainability lens, and I had the tech and the fashion, and we kind of met in the middle. And Citizen Wolf was really the outcome, I guess, of us sitting down and thinking, well, why is it so broken? It seems so, when you step back and you start asking questions from first principles, the fashion industry just doesn't make sense. It's just batshit insane. And so we were like, well, why, number one, and then why couldn't it be different? And it was really those very naive questions that set us off on this path.
Yeah, so for those that don't know Citizen Wolf, tell us about your core value propositions, because there's still a technology piece there, isn't it, with the smart fit and so on. But
yeah,
what are the value props?
So at the customer level, the value prop is perfect fit.
Yep.
It's when we began, we started thinking it's insane that the clothes that we wear all the time generally fit the worst, right? In that if you're getting married, you can get a dress, you can get a suit, tailor-made normally, fits you perfectly, you wear it for one day. Maybe more than one day, but generally
I tried to dust off my wedding tux for this event. It didn't go well.
Exactly, because bodies change, right? So our whole thing was that just seems silly that the clothes we wear every day are the least well-fitting. So, and there was nobody really trying to take all the benefits of custom fit and tailoring into the casual wardrobe. And so we saw it as a great opportunity, but also as something that we felt customers would really respond to. So, that was the starting point. And then we were like, okay, we need to make it. So we chose T-shirts as our proof of concept, basically, for the technology and the system that we were trying to create. Because T-shirts are fairly easy to make. On the flip side, kind of hard to sell. So we knew that if we could solve the technology issues and the supply issue, right, in terms of making it on demand, making it custom fit, then once we started to get into other clothes, basically jeans are our North Star, right? We've always thought that the opportunity in custom fit denim is massive.
Yep.
And every single woman we ever speak to who comes into the shop validates that assumption. But look, denim's a completely different business, but that's where we're going. That's our North Star. Our thesis with product is quite simple in that we'll only ever make evergreen products. So the things that the wardrobe staples that everybody owns, that everybody wears all the time, that everybody wears through as well, because that's good for repeat purchase and that's good for creating a long-term sustainable business.
And it's the opposite of fast fashion.
And it's the fundamental opposite of fast fashion. So we offer free repairs for life.
I saw that.
On everything that we make. And that's a terrible business decision, right? Like, it's a cost to the business. But it's the right thing to do for the customer. It's the right thing to do for the planet as well.
So on that, how do you feel about there's a lot of businesses guilty of greenwashing or having an environmental impact statement and then sort of leaving it there. You're 100% right though. To actually put a stake in the ground is commercially doesn't always make sense. How does that pay you back in the long run? Where does that start to pay dividends?
Look, I think that's a great question, because ultimately it's a brand play, right? And it's very tricky to value brand, as I'm sure you're aware. But we have a saying internally that we've taken from our ad agency days, which is from one of the greatest ad men of all time, Bill Bernbach, and he said that it's not a principle until it costs you money. Because a lot of people are saying the right thing, but until you're prepared to spend more as a business to do the thing, it's just hot air and it's just greenwashing. And like, to your point, I feel like that's our greatest challenge, because we make everything here in Sydney. So we're Ethical Clothing Australia accredited, which is fantastic because it means all of our people are paid award wage or above. We're vetted by the unions. It's all good. Not everybody wants to pay for that though, right? On the sustainability front, the system that we've created generates 48% less carbon per unit than mass-produced fashion. But again, not everybody wants to pay for that. So even though I think we're doing all the right things, and in many cases I'd say best practice in the industry, we're always struggling with price, and we're always struggling with everybody else saying they're doing all these things, but actually just churning out tens of thousands of units every day, every week, whatever it is. So greenwashing is I'd say it's our biggest challenge.
I think as you're talking, I think the strength that you're going to attract in your brand that does lend itself towards extreme brand loyalty. So the introduction of new products is certainly, I think, interesting, particularly the denim one. Do you see Citizen Wolf going rapidly into new product, or is that going to be a slow and steady kind of approach?
So up until now, it's been very consciously, we've made the decision, to consciously not go beyond t-shirts too quickly. We had some very good advice early on, which is make sure, basically, TLDR, make sure you've got your ducks in a row before you complicate your life. Because because we make it ourselves, right? It's not like any other fashion brand. We're just like, oh, we want to get into this category. Let's go find a factory that makes that thing, and it's just like done. But we've actually got to skill up in the factory to learn how to make these things, right? So it's quite complex on that side of things. So we've been very conscious to not too aggressively go into new product. But we've made 50,000 Magic Fit t-shirts now. So we feel like we've sort of hit a threshold where we've fundamentally validated that product and the value prop of custom fit is working. And so now it really is that the next step for the business is, okay, well, what else are we going to get into? So, because our ambition has always been to make the entire casual wardrobe. And like, if my vision of the future of people's wardrobes is, because there's a lot of good things with rental services, people that are for statement pieces or like the one-offs that you're going to an event or whatever, it just makes sense to rent that stuff. It's good for you, it's good for the planet, it's ultimately cheaper as well. But on the flip side, there's always the clothes that we wear all the time, the evergreen basics that form the backbone of everyone's wardrobe. So that's what we want Citizen Wolf to be. So if it was, both sides of that wardrobe, maybe one day in the future we have some kind of a rental service, or we partner with somebody like that. But yeah, so the next step is sort of getting into new product. We just released sweats this winter.
I was going to ask if that was one of yours.
Yeah,
it is.
And so that's been really good. And to your point about customer loyalty, when we look at our data, what we can see very clearly is that compared to industry averages, our loyalty is about 3.5 times better.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, and it makes sense because in the category of fashion, repeat purchase is driven by fit. In fact, the data is very clear. I think it's 81 or 89% of repeat purchases based on fit. If it doesn't fit, you're not going to buy it again, right? If it does fit, you're far more likely. So our whole promise of perfect fit, it is basically, it locks in repeat purchase down the line.
And for those maybe that have just joined, at the start you made a point, so talking to Zoltan from Citizen Wolf, you made a point that one in three garments from the fashion industry end up in landfill without being worn. Tags on, still worn, still in the box. I saw a diagram on your website that explains the three journeys of where a product can go: the linear journey, the recycle journey, and the circular journey.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference in, probably know the first one, but particularly in recycle versus fully circular?
Yeah, so...
And why shortcomings of either, and what's the best option for the planet?
So the starting point is both are way better than the take, make, waste linear model, right? That's terrible. We've got to move away from that. I think the first step away from that is recycling, or it's kind of like reuse, right? And that's where charities come in, and that's great, right? They can extend the life of any one product for a given amount of time. It might only be one more life though, right? It might only be a very short-term extension to the life of that product, and then it ultimately ends up in landfill anyway, right? So it's not ideal, even though it's better. So circularity, true circularity, which we've recently achieved, is, I guess, the holy grail in that sense. What we can do now is make you a t-shirt out of a virgin fabric, custom fit to your body and all that. Free repairs for life. So whilst you want to wear it, we'll make sure that it looks as good as it can. And then once you're done with it, we've just introduced a take-back scheme. So it's cost neutral to the customer. We will refund you the postage. You send it back to me. And then I can combine that old garment with our pre-consumer waste that comes off the laser cutter. And it gets sent to Spain. Sadly, it's not in Australia, but it gets sent to Spain, gets turned into a 50% recycled cotton, 50% organic cotton virgin fabric, or yarn actually. We import the yarn because almost all of our fabric's knitted here in Melbourne, in Australia. So yeah, I can sell you a t-shirt, keep it on you for as long as humanly possible. When you're done with it, that t-shirt can go to become your next t-shirt. And that is true circularity, right? Where the resources, it's not perfect, it's not a lossless system, but it's certainly far better than any alternative.
So you could literally be re-wearing your old t-shirt in a new design.
Yeah, because it becomes new fabric,
yeah.
Right? So yeah, your old t-shirt becomes your first t-shirt becomes your next t-shirt. We've got to solve the marketing on this. We haven't really done it, but like the Forever t-shirt or something like that. We haven't really, because it's all quite new. We haven't.
Being an ad guy, I'm sure you've got that covered.
We'll get there.
Yeah. And what about waste in the factory? So offcuts and things like that. How do you tackle that?
Yeah. So we've been zero waste since day one, and very proudly so, because something in the order of 60 million square kilometres of fabric waste, offcut waste, in the fashion industry is sent to landfill every year. And for context, that's I think that's basically as big as the island of Sri Lanka. Wow. That much fabric. And it's just sent to landfill, and that's just on the offcut scraps of the cutting. So we knew we didn't want to contribute to that problem. As we've scaled the business, we've had various solutions. So we started working with a local textile jewellery artist. So she'd take the scrap and make little strips and knot it up and make stuff. And that was cool, whilst we were very small. And then we got a bit bigger, and she couldn't take anymore, so we had to look for a new solution, and we ended up patchworking it up, and we make a few products called the Zero Waste. We make a tote, we make a scarf, stuff like that. Then we got into knitting wool. So before we got to where we are now, which is with the recycled t-shirt fabric, we had what I refer to as the mini disc phase, where we were making knitting yarn from our offcut scraps. But yeah, we were always gunning for this moment of circularity where the object or the thing can become the same thing, right? It's not like, I forget the exact term, but it's like within recycling there's upcycling and something else. Anyway, it's like there's no loss effectively. So yeah, sending nothing to landfill has always been a core part of how we do business.
And I wanted to ask you about manufacturing in Australia. So you've got you're manufacturing in Marrickville, which in Sydney has a very long, proud history of clothing manufacturing.
Yeah.
I know recently, in the last year or so, a lot of brands, a lot of businesses are feeling supply chain pressures, particularly those importing from anywhere really, with rising costs and tensions and all those things. And I've seen a lot of businesses start to rethink where they manufacture. The conversation is usually we're too far gone to bring it back to Australia, or we're too scared of costs. How did you find the experience of setting up shop in manufacturing in Australia?
So that's a great question. Because in my previous experience, I had that outsourced China, Portugal thing. And so I was aware of how difficult and frustrating that can be. So I was very conscious that I didn't want to repeat that. And then the other thing was, we knew that if we didn't make it here in Australia, that our delivery timelines or our make timelines would blow out substantially, right? Because if it's not hard to go and get a custom suit these days. None of them are made here. They're all made mostly in China. And on a good day, you might get that suit back in 6 weeks, right? And then you have to go through the fitting process and all the rest of it, if it's not quite right. We knew that people probably weren't going to wait 6 weeks for a custom fit t-shirt. It's a garment that everybody wears, but it's not this super high involvement category, right? Like a suit. So that it just really wasn't an option. So when we started, we were hand measuring people here in Sydney and hand cutting t-shirts. I cut about 2,000 t-shirts by hand using paper patterns and moving them around to make it a bit bigger here, a bit smaller there, based on what the customer needed. So we did that 2,000 times, and we had to figure out the local supply chain. It just wasn't an option. Thanks. Kind of wasn't an option to do anything else. But then we got to the point where we were like, okay, we're making so many now that
your hands were getting tired.
That, and also like the tiny little mum and dad operation that we found that were willing to work with us at the start. We would deliver them a box of cut t-shirts, and it would sit on her floor for 2 weeks before she got to it. And then I just couldn't get it across the line, where I'm like, well, can I just deliver them to you on Tuesday if you're going to sew them on Wednesday? And she was like, no, if they're not on the floor, they're not in the line, they're not in the system, they're just no. And so at the start, it took us about 4 weeks to make a t-shirt. And the fact that anybody waited 4 weeks for one of our t-shirts on day one blows my mind. Whereas today we make them in, on average, about 7 days. But we had to create our own factory here, you know, and so we did. But we started, and I guess because it's been an ongoing process, and we've been able to scale it up as we needed to. It wasn't ever as sort of like shocking as it would be to come back and go, great, well, I need to make sort of 10,000 units a week or something, whatever it might be. So, but you know, now we've got this factory in Marrickville. We've got 3 seamstresses full-time on staff. We've got all these machines and all this space. And it's amazing when I look back at kind of where we came from. But it's also, you know, from the business side, just being completely honest and transparent, it's really hard. Because we've got 12 people full-time in the business, 9 people are in the factory. So there's only 3 people doing all of the rest of the stuff. And that includes our own technology, because we're doing the tech in-house. All to say, manufacturing locally is something that we're really passionate about, but it's incredibly difficult as a business. And then when we go and talk to investors, they look at the cost structure of the business and they're like, well, this doesn't fit the pattern for fashion, right? Not that really anyone wants to invest in fashion, but like, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But, you know, they look at our cost base and they're like, wow, that's not how it normally works. But we did that, and we found ourselves in this position because we ultimately couldn't convince anyone in the local supply chain to change the way they wanted to work. There's not that many people left, as you probably know, and so the suppliers that are still here are generally very good, generally in high demand. They have plenty of work. They don't need to change, and they're old. Everybody in the garment manufacturing business is old. And old people are set in their ways, and as I become an old man, I'm well aware of this, you know, and it's much, much harder to change. So it seems insane, but like the simplest thing for us to do was start our own factory.
Sounds easy. Although, as you say that, you know, it must be incredibly tough to do it. But am I right in saying you're holding no inventory, so you don't need inventory cover? So that's a bit of cash back into the business.
Yeah.
That's probably an advantage.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the beauty of our model is that, you know, we don't hold inventory, and we also never go on sale. We're not trying to move distressed inventory. I'm not in the traditional fashion business where I'm trying to make you feel shit about yourself to solve that through buying the new latest greatest thing. You know, we do evergreen basics. Colour's a big part of our business, and we use that to drive repeat purchase. So we launch a new colour every 2 weeks. We have about 5 or 6 fabrics, so in any one fabric, we launch a new colour every 2 weeks. 26 colours a year, and some of them sell out really quick, some of them don't. But it doesn't really bother me because we don't hold inventory. So the cactus green colour that I launched 2 weeks ago, if it doesn't sell this week, this month, even this year, no problem. Eventually I know that somebody somewhere is going to go, that's the green for me. And then we can make it into whatever they want. So yeah, we just don't have those pressures on the inventory and on the capital side of the business. So it allows us to be way more flexible.
Yeah, and although, as you say, an investor might look at this business and think these are foreign cost structures, I guess as you're talking, I'm hearing you don't need to go on sale, so you're protecting your margin there.
Yep.
I imagine you've got a fiercely loyal customer, and as we know, it costs a lot less to bring a customer back than it does to acquire one.
Yep.
So the economics could be quite favourable, particularly as time goes on.
Yeah, and you know, we're direct to consumer. Our acquisition costs are high, right? There's not a huge amount of people searching for custom fit t-shirts, or at least there wasn't when we started.
Not yet.
But we can afford to pay quite a high CAC because we know we get it back. But even still, we're very, I guess, fortunate to be profitable on the first order as well. And that's getting better over time. You know, as we get it better on the factory side of our business, as we get operationally more efficient, we obviously can build margin there in a way that other fashion brands can't, right? Because they send the PO, they get a box back with an invoice. The price is the price, right? whereas day by day we can make our factory more efficient and actually build margin there. So yeah, it makes sense. It's so unconventional that it's difficult for people to wrap their heads around.
Caution,
Yeah.
sure. Now we've spoken about the North Star is denim. Do you think export is on your horizon? Can you see that happening?
Yeah, we up until now we've really only sold in Australia, and that's for a couple of reasons. One of which is we have a perfect fit guarantee. If we make you something and you don't absolutely love it, we'll remake it for free. So we don't have a returns process or even policy really, because it's no good to me if it comes back anyway, right? So, but that does mean that we need to make things twice sometimes. Our technology is always getting better, which is great. And currently it sits at about a 6% fail rate, right? Which is what we equate to our returns rate. 6 to 9% it fluctuates, but always within that band. And for context, if you don't know, that's about 4 times better than the rest of the industry. In fashion, in e-com in Australia, it's about 30 to 50% of every sale comes back. So we're at about 6%. We're 4x better already. But obviously the remakes cost the business. Where that gets more challenging with international is that it's one thing to pay double postage here in Australia. It's quite another if we're shipping DHL Express or whatever to wherever. And so we haven't chased that market because it's a very easy way to sink the ship. But we're getting to the point now where, despite there being a lot of headroom in the Aussie market for us, it makes more sense to start expanding overseas. So that's really part of the next step for us.
And a question I come up against a lot, I work with a lot of retailers. I come from the rag trade for a period of time. There's a lot of resistance to change. There's a lot of talk.
Yep.
There's a bit of skepticism, I guess, around what customers say they will do and what they actually will do.
Yeah.
How quickly are sentiments changing?
Yeah,
No doubt. How quickly are you seeing genuine, you've sold quite a lot of t-shirts already, but how quickly are you seeing the way customers purchase? Are they genuinely moving away from fast fashion and looking to make better decisions for the planet? Is that movement, where are we in that movement? Are we right at the infancy? Are we well and truly there? Or there's not a lot of people doing what you're doing, so I think we're very early.
Yeah.
But where do you see it? Where are customers at?
I think in many ways we are at the start of that journey still. Everybody says they want to do the right thing. Everybody wants to purchase ethically. Everybody wants to purchase sustainably. But when you get to the checkout, that's where the rubber hits the road. And not everybody's willing to back those decisions, right? And back to my earlier point, it's not a principle until it costs you money. It's easy to say that you're sustainable, but if you're not willing to make that purchase and incur the cost of doing it, then you're not really. But the corollary to that statement is what we talk about it a lot internally, which is this idea of the green tax, which is it sadly just does cost the consumer more to do the right thing. So what I think our long-term strategy at Citizen Wolf is to, and we have various ways we're going to execute this, but basically get to price parity with not the entire market. Like I'm never going to hit parity with Kmart for a t-shirt, but I don't want to either, because, and I don't mean to single out them, but just, that kind of mass market segment.
Well, you would back your quality and therefore the higher price point.
Yeah, but also so much of the fashion industry is so little of the price paid at the checkout is actually reflective of the true cost. When you factor in ethics and sustainability, the negative externalities of slavery and carbon and the whole bit, right? So very few people are charging the what would we consider to be the correct price. So we're never going to try and get there, but our ultimate strategy is if we can hit price parity with the sort of the premium end of the market, but certainly not luxury, not premium, maybe like the mass premium. I don't know what that segment's called exactly. Whilst delivering 48% less carbon and guaranteed ethics, then if we can basically remove that green tax, then we feel like we win.
Okay, so inevitably there'll be some people in fashion listening to this, maybe some sitting out there. I'm from that background. What does fashion in Australia need to do better? I mean, let's not give away your even if you did, it's not easy to replicate what you've gone and done. But if you were looking at this, objectively, what advice would you give fast fashion or fashion in Australia? What do they need to do better?
So I think that over time, the market is going to move to where we are at Citizen Wolf. I think there's pressure coming down from governments and increasing regulation. We're starting to see it in the EU around carbon. That's going to end up here in Australia as well. So there is going to be regulation putting pressure on the industry from the top down. At the same time, to your point, sentiment's changing, and there's a groundswell of pressure from the customers up to also do the right thing. That's going to force the industry to fundamentally assess and change, I think, the way they do business. And our ambition is to, at that point, have our technology scaled out to all garments, such that we can pivot into or spin out the technology as its own solution for the rest of the industry, for anyone who wants to move to a made-to-order model, to do so without having to go through all the learning, growing pains that we did. And so, Citizen Wolf as a brand will always exist, but we had to start the brand to prove the tech, and it was always about the technology for us. It was always about a different way and a better way of working, and our ultimate ambition is to be the tech solution that powers this change throughout the rest of the industry. Because our metrics, our customer loyalty metrics are better, and our return rates are significantly better. And so it's only a matter of time, I feel, until customers are willing to wait for their stuff a little bit, where made-to-order starts to make sense.
So you've got the trifecta going. You're in fashion, you're in e-com, and you're in tech. Not bad. With this, okay, so I love that idea that there's a real tech business here. If another business uses this tech eventually, they'll need to manufacture locally as well, set up shop. The idea is that this tech will make that process easier for them. They can go and get the factory, whatever, but you'll have the tech that sorts out the made-to-measure, made-to-order components.
Yes, yeah.
So you're bridging that gap, really.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a world where we are the factory as well for other people. I'm not sure that's a business I want to get into because it's a really different one. But that's certainly one possible outcome.
So you're going to the fourth field, manufacturing.
Yeah, but we kind of think of ourselves, or think, almost like AWS to Amazon. So our technology, our Magic Fit technology to Citizen Wolf is like AWS to Amazon, in that we hope to eventually spin out the tech to power lots of different things. Now, I think the important thing to say is that there's automation coming to the fashion manufacturing supply chain, and that's going to fundamentally make people reassess whether or not outsourcing to the third world is the right decision. Because the robot doesn't care if it's located in Sydney or Calcutta or Shanghai, right? And the cost base is more or less the same once you've paid for the machine. And so I fundamentally think there's an enormous opportunity in Australia via automation in the supply chain to reshore a bunch of manufacturing. So it's not that I want to have an enormous factory of hundreds or thousands of seamstresses here in Sydney, but I do think that our technology on the custom fit side and the factory management side, mixed with automated sewing, is going to fundamentally re-engineer the way clothes are made.
Yeah, cool. And Zoltan, who are some of the brands globally that have inspired you on this journey? Who do you think is doing it well out there?
I think it's hard to be in fashion and not name check somebody like Patagonia. I have a lot of admiration, obviously, for what they do. They've changed the game. They were in organic cotton 20 years before anybody thought it was cool, all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, Patagonia is still part of the problem. Patagonia is still a mass production business. They still make purchase decisions based on inaccurate forecasting. And until they change, I don't think that they can be held up as the sort of pinnacle of sustainability, because they're not, they're treating the symptom, not the cause. So,
so no one's doing it well, really.
Look, I think the interesting thing is that what we're doing with Citizen Wolf in many ways is trying to bring it right back to the way clothes were originally made, which was in a small geography for a local population, custom fit to the person that was going to wear it. Basically, pre-industrial revolution fashion was hyper-local and fit for purpose. And I guess with technology, we're just hoping to do that at scale. But as we expand overseas, our ambition is we'll start by making out of Sydney, but our ambition is actually to have multiple micro factories. So if Europe ends up testing well first, we'll probably set up a small factory in Portugal. If America ends up testing well first, we'll set up a small factory in LA. And the whole idea of local labor, local fabrics for the local market is something that's sort of, I guess, the guiding principle for how we're going to expand. And I guess that's the roadmap for how fashion can get less destructive.
Okay, and look, something that's really hit home with me is the wastage. And as you're talking about I'm really stuck on this 1 in 3 items. It's outrageous. And it makes total sense though, because right now more than ever, you're talking about demand forecasting and Patagonia. And essentially, if you get that wrong, and no one can get that right at the moment, by the way, year-on-year comps are impossible. And there are a lot of businesses out there holding way too much inventory. In many businesses, it is more cost-effective to write that stock off and dump it. And that's you don't really see that.
No.
To be honest, as a consumer, you don't. But even inside a business, you often don't see it. But it is sometimes what they do and dump extraordinary. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of that this year, given that so many businesses are holding inventory. So the leanness of this, it just makes so much sense. Eliminating the wastage through better ordering, not to mention it's so much better for cash flow. So there's a few pennies sort of dropping for me here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've recently gone through a crowdfunding raise on Virtual, and that's forced us to do a lot of thinking and comms around the business. And where we kind of came to is, which we've never really talked about before, but Citizen Wolf, it flips the model on its head, right? Instead of trying to predict what people want in advance and then making it and then crossing your fingers hoping that it sells, if it doesn't go on sale, if it doesn't sell again in it, what we do is so incredibly simple, radically simple. All we do is ask people what they want and make it. There's no translation issues in the middle. I don't have to pretend like I think I know what you might like. I just ask. I ask each one of you directly, what do you want? And then we go and make it. And that simplicity of an idea is something that we've never really been across as a business from a comms perspective, but that's how we're reframing the industry, right? Why would you base billions or trillions of dollars worth of purchasing decisions on guessing? Because nobody can predict the future. Whereas if we can get the manufacturing times quick enough to compete with Ecomm, all we need to be able to do is ask people, what do you want? And then we go and make it.
But what I like is that you've got the tech that's obviously sound, because you think back to Shoes of Prey, which didn't work so well. Although being from a shoe background myself, why anybody would try and do made-to-measure shoes is beyond me. But the tech piece is really important in this. So yes, it makes sense to I guess say, what do you want? Go and make it. Cash positive, happy days. But what you've also addressed is get that fit right. And I think you said you've got a 6% return rate or fail rate, which is outstanding. So you've obviously nailed that tech piece as well. So for me, that's probably what I didn't know about the business, is that it had this, great fabrics and ethical way of producing, but the technology behind it, I think, is something that other retailers really at some point in their lives could take advantage of. So for me, that's really exciting. I wanted to ask you, just slightly off topic, we've probably got a few minutes left, but we're at Online Retailer. You're well and truly in online retail.
Yep.
It's been an interesting year, to raise funds. How do you feel with the state of play at the moment in the industry, and how do you feel about the next 12 months for the industry?
Look, I think who knows what's going to happen over the next 12 months, right? But the macro context isn't good. That's for sure. So I think it is going to be a really interesting time where I want to think that we're somewhat insulated in that we sell evergreen basics, and our customer tends to be a bit wealthier. That they're able to make purchase decisions which include ethics and sustainability, and afford to make those decisions.
Would I also be right in saying they can't actually go and get it from many competitors because there wouldn't be many doing this, right?
Well, that's the other thing, yeah. I mean, there's only 3 people in the world that are doing what we're doing. One other is out of Denmark, and they only do menswear. And then actually in America, Amazon has created its own version of Citizen Wolf, effectively, for men and women, t-shirts only. But they force you to download their app.
Of course.
They force you to take photographs of yourself, upload it to the Amazon cloud. Data privacy is not exactly something that company is known for, and so we fundamentally think that that's a huge barrier to most consumers. So yeah, there are not, to your point, very, very many other places people can go for that. But look, I guess to answer your question, we've just raised money on virtual. That was great. It was challenging. We're going to hire less people than we probably thought we were going to hire, just because we're conscious of the macro environment moving forward. So we're just going to control costs rather than growth at all costs is sort of not what we're after. We want to grow decently, but it's somewhat organically, and that's the knife edge.
And just on the virtual raise, how was that process for you? Was that challenging, enjoyable, a lot of work to get your ducks in a row?
Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, it was, all of those things. And it's probably a little bit too fresh to say it was enjoyable. But, it was a conscious decision for us in that we've been around 5 years now, almost 6. We've got tens of thousands of customers here in Australia. Because we give them what they want, they absolutely love us, right? Because the rest of the fashion industry is defined by compromise. They get exactly what they want with Citizen Wolf. So they absolutely love us, love what we do, and they tend to be wealthy, right? And so it was a really good fit with crowdsourced equity, because we were pretty confident that we'd be able to bring a bunch of our best customers along the journey with us. And that's exactly what ended up happening, which is great.
Love it. Well, look, we're probably at about time, but I guess closing thoughts from me, Zoltan. You've drawn a line in the sand. That takes guts. You're probably ruffling a few feathers along the way, and that's incredibly brave. But you can't help but think that this is going to pay significant dividends for the business and for the planet. And I would encourage people to get behind it.
Thank you.
Follow the story, Citizen Wolf. Zoltan's story is pretty cool. So if you're listening, get behind it and follow the journey. And that concludes our chat. So Zoltan, thank you very much for joining me today.
Not at all. Thanks for having me. It's great.